Everyone, we are back. Welcome back to another episode of Greenlife Garden Home DIY channel. We are about to can tomatoes and okra today. I have also peppers that I'm going to be canning. I think I showed you guys in a video how I store my peppers. I simply just put them in the freezer. I was on the phone talking to a relative and they kind of started thawing out. If you could cut them while froze, fine. If they thaw, that's fine too. Alright, these tomatoes are some Roma tomatoes I picked up last year from the farmer's market. And some people go ahead and blanch theirs and get the skin off. I'm not. I'm going to leave my skin on. Everything was washed before I put it in the freezer. This is okra from my garden. I had it in the freezer. I took it out. I'm going to cut it up. And these are some tomatoes from my garden last year. And I'm going to go ahead and get the okra and tomatoes in a pot. Get them up to a high heat. And then I'm going to be packing them into my jars. Now my jars have been washed. And what I'm about to do now is go ahead and put them in the oven on about 225 for maybe 15-30 minutes. And get them dry and sterile. And then, yeah, I'm going to go ahead and start getting everything packed into the jars. I'm going to blanch my peppers once I get them cut up. And then I'm going to put them inside of jars as well. And I'm going to fill it up with hot water. Alright, so hold on and I'll show you what we got going on. Okay, so I'm about to start cutting up my okra. As you can see, it's still kind of frozen. I'm going to cut this end off and I'm going to cut this end off. And those are going to go over there. And I'm going to cut these into right at about a ½ inch. And then I'm going to just put them over in my pot right here. So in all, I had about 1.5 pounds of okra. Got it all chopped. I just put it in the bowl to weigh it. Now I'm going to go ahead and chop up my tomatoes. Alright, so we have 1 pound and about 10 ounces here of the cherry tomatoes. 2 pounds and 1.3 ounces of the Roma tomatoes. I noticed as these thaw out, you can actually just, it's easier to just peel the skin. I just didn't want to go through the hassle, and then I cut this end off. And you could go ahead and chop it at this time. I'm going to coarsely chop it and just put it over in the pot. So I've started chopping up my peppers. My mom gave me these last year. I just kind of chunked them over in the freezer. So go ahead and get those all chopped up. My bell peppers all cut up. I'm going to give them a good rinse and then I'm going to blanch them. And you're going to blanch them in hot water for just a few minutes or so until they get a little soft. Then we'll pack them in a jar. Okay, so I've just turned my tomatoes and okra off. I did not add any water to the pot. I just let it go ahead and stew down into its own juices. And now I'm about to get everything all canned up. Okay, so I'm blanching my peppers. I'm going to be packing them in the jar at the same time as I pack my okra and tomatoes. Okay, so I'm going to go ahead and add my mixture over into my jars. I really need my ladle. A certain person borrowed it from me. Okay, let me go ahead and get that done and I'll show you what it looks like. Okay, so I've got 4 jars out of this, and I may have to top it off just a little bit because I'm going to leave 1 inch head space. And what that means is this should be able to barely touch the top of what's in your jar. That's 1 inch. I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to add my salt. I'm going to put a ½ teaspoon. The salt doesn't serve a purpose for preservation. It's only for flavoring. I use sea salt if you try to use salt with iodine in it, you will have a cloudy look in your jars. Let's see. And I'm going to add a half a teaspoon of Italian seasoning. Let me get my hands free. Okay, so what I'm doing now is what we call debubbling to make sure we don't have any air inside the jar that could create an issue as far as the jar sealing. And we don't want any air pockets left for anything to be trying to grow either. I'm going to get finished debubbling and see if I need to add any more mixture to the jars to make sure I have my 1-inch head space, and then we'll move on. And a lot of you may be thinking you're supposed to put lemon juice with tomatoes when you can. Well, if you'll go back and look at the ball instructions, you don't have to do that when you're canning okra with tomatoes. The reason you would do the lemon juice with just the plain tomato is because tomatoes are about 4.6 on the pH scale, and that means it's falling between being an acidic food and an alkaline food. Tomatoes can actually be canned in a bath, what you call a bath canner, and when you do it this way, you don't have to use that. You can just use the pressure canner. But other than that, I would have added a tablespoon of lemon juice to each jar, and I would have went ahead and put them in the bath canner instead of the pressure cooker, or pressure canner, shall I say. Alright, so I've got all of my jars filled. Right now, I have a little glass container of vinegar right here, and I'm basically just going to go make sure I wipe the tops clean, and you always want to do that to make sure that you don't have anything on there that's going to keep that lid from sticking. Alright, other than that, you want to make sure you also are checking your rim of your glass to see if there's any cracks or anything in your jar. Okay, so get that wiped off really good. And now I'm going to simply use my little magnetic device to come over here and get my lids out of the hot water. You don't have to dry them off, just put them on there. Yeah, and this is why it's so important to have your little garden, you know. You see how much vegetables I had, and I only got like 4 pint-sized jars out of that. So you want to put your rings on finger tight. I'm going to go ahead and put my bell peppers over into my jar, and I'll be packing them with water that is in here. I'm only going to add a half a teaspoon of salt, no other seasonings to this in particular. Initially, I thought I was going to have so many, about 16 wide mouth pint-sized jars, which would have taken 8, would have taken up the bottom, and I would have had to put a rack on to stack the other 8 on top. Well, I only have about 7 jars, so you see I have these little rings in here. Those are regular mouth size rings, or you could use your large wide mouth ring, just depending on what size you need to be able to set your jar on top. So I had to get a little bit creative right there because I did not have a rack to go on the bottom and one to actually stack. So that's why those are there. But I could actually remove those and put the rack in because I don't have to worry about that now that I don't have but 7 jars, and I'm going to show you what I'm going to do with the 8th jar to keep it balanced. Okay, so the first thing I want to do is go ahead and start debubbling these jars. Before I do that, you'll notice this jar has only water in it, and that's going to be to just balance out my the weight of my pot. Okay, because when you use a wide mouth rim for the canner that I have, which is a 23 quart Presto, you could only fit 8 in the bottle, and there's a rack that you could use to put another 8 stacked on top. This water, I'm going to go ahead and let it serve as sterile water, and I'm going to store that up too. These, you definitely want to make sure you get in there and debubble and get all of that air out, because again, you don't want it to siphon, and you don't want it to have any air bubbles left in there. So I'm going to put this camera down, and I'm going to go ahead and finish doing that to each jar. And I'm going to wipe the tops just like I did the tomatoes and put my lids on with vinegar. I'm getting ready to put my lid on. It's always important to inspect it by making sure that that hole is clear. You could run a little pipe cleaner through it. Just making sure that my band isn't harmed or hurt in any way, damaged rather. Every now and then after I wash the pot, I'll go ahead and I will oil it up a little bit, make sure that's working and everything is clear, and you know, we're ready to roll. Got everything in the pot. I'm going to go ahead and pour in the vinegar that I was using to wipe the jars off with. That's going to help keep the jars nice and clean when they come out, not all filmy, and the pot also seems to look a whole lot better when you do vinegar in it. Got my lid on. I've got my fire up high. I'm gonna let this build pressure, and once it builds pressure, you're gonna see steam start to come out of there, and once it goes steady for about 10 minutes, I'm going to then put my weight on only after I see it going for 10 minutes, blowing steam, and that's going to start to raise this pressure. Once the pressure gets to 11 pounds, which is what's recommended for canning okra, tomatoes, or vegetables in my altitude, I'm going to let this can at that pressure for 25 minutes. But only after it gets to 11 pounds of pressure am I going to start my 25-minute timer. Okay, you can see that steam coming out of there. I've already set my timer for 10 minutes. I'm going to let that go, and then I'm going to put my weight on, and we'll time it for 25 minutes once it get up to 25 pounds of, 11 pounds of pressure. Okay, so my timer went off. Still got a steady stream of steam. I'm going to go ahead and put this on. Now, I'm going to wait for this to come up to 11 pounds of pressure, and I am going to start my timer for 25 minutes. This little safety lock should be getting ready to pop up any moment. Okay, so we've made our way up to 11 pounds of pressure. I know exactly where I need to turn my heat to get it to just stay right there. So if you're using your own canner for the first time, you'll figure that out. If you are a vet or somebody that's just watching to be watching, you already know. Okay, so if you're new to canning, you notice that it's went over 11 pounds, which is what I was aiming for, just a little bit. Don't get all scared and start running out the house and turning the fire off. Just adjust your heat until it gets to a place where it'll hold that steady 11 pounds of pressure. And that is going to be for 25 minutes that we're trying to hold that pressure. Okay, my timer just went off. You can see I held at 11 pounds of pressure. I'm going to go ahead and turn my stove off. And once this comes all the way down to 0, and this little pressure lock gauge, nipple, whatever you want to call it, drops, then and only then I will remove my lid, because there's still a lot of pressure in there, and until that happens, I will not remove this lid. And when I do remove it, I will be turning the lid back towards me, and that way the steam could go that way. Okay, so we are done. We got all of our jars out of the pot. You can see they're still boiling inside, even though the pressure came all the way down. These things are really hot. And so, yeah, we got us some canned okra and tomatoes.
It looked like a piece of sauce at first, guys.
You can see that that's still trying to bubble. I'm counting a little dark spot, and she's getting a little bit too close. I was trying to catch it cooking. Usually you could still see it cooking, like these peppers here. All right. Oh, also I have my water that's sterile now, and I'm gonna just store that as well. Never know, might need that for something. You heard that one? This one just sealed. That's the sound of your lid sealing to let you know that it is properly sealed and ready to be put away. So hopefully the rest of them will start pinging any second now. And yeah, we're good to go. All right, everybody, so that's it. Thank you so much for hanging out with us today while we did some canning. Got so much more going on and a lot more to share. Do make sure you like, share this video and subscribe. And we'll see you in the next video. Yeah.
One love, y'all.
All right.
Giving all that good energy, y'all.
All right. Hey, y'all. That's it. All right, one last thing. What I'm going to do is go ahead and take some soapy water here. And I always use a few drops of dish detergent and some vinegar. And then I wipe down my jars. As you can see, I've already taken the lids off of it. Okay. Wipe them down good. That way anything that got on them, especially if you're canning citrus or something sweet like jam, you won't attract rodents and you won't have it trying to spoil on your on the outside. That is, nothing's gonna get in here. That's safe, but you still want to just make sure everything is wiped down or wiped off. Some people completely submerge theirs into the sink with water. I don't go all out like that, but I do take a minute to wipe everything down to make sure there's no residual on the outside of the jar that would attract anything or create any other issues on the outside of the jar, that is, because again the inside is fine. All right. Okay, all I'm going to do now is go ahead and put my rings over here in this water so I can wash them too and get them dried as quick as you can, and that way they don't start trying to rust on you. And I may have to add just a little bit more water to that. I'm going to go ahead and put my date, which is the 16th, on every jar, and I could also put what's in here. Okra and tomato, yeah. And I did put a little bit of Italian seasoning, so I'm going to write Italian. And the reason I write on these tops and not just use the labels that you can get, I had them just a minute ago, I think they're, but it's because these tops, the only thing that you're not supposed to use them again. That was for those. The other ones are in there and on my seat, I think. But these tops, you are not supposed to use again because they would be considered compromised after being put in a pot and under pressure. But you can save them to cap off your jars for canning, you know, something that may be dry that you're not going to be putting any heat to. Yeah, so don't throw them away. And some people use them again for canning. I mean, you know, it is what it is. So yeah, everything could be somewhat of a little bit of a risk. So that's life. You know, if I was in a situation where I couldn't get any, heck yeah, if I was trying to preserve some food, I'd use them. I don't mean to be saying anything that would have you making any bad practices, but I'm just saying what I would do in an emergency or a bad situation. You run the risk of them not sealing though, and that's pretty much it. All right, so that's what I want to show you guys right quick. I also have my sterile water here, and with sterile water you want to put a little bit of mineral salt in it whenever you do get ready to drink it, because it could taste rather flat. But if you're using it to clean a wound or something like that, hey, it's good to go. And I'm just going to go ahead and label the tops of everything.